All right, so with that, we will go right into our panel with bots for media consumption. So we have Sam Mandel, CEO of Poncho, as well as partner at BetaWorks to moderate that panel. And I will let Sam take it from here.
Thanks, Patrick. So also coming up, we have John Steinberg, who's a legend of New York tech and most recently founder of Cheddar. And Cam Burley, who I think is a future legend of New York tech, and he's the founder of Bytes, which is one of the most exciting companies at BotCamp, and Cam's one of the most knowledgeable people about the media that we have at BetaWorks and BotCamp right now. So, I have to say, I always wanted to do a set at Joe's Pub, but this isn't exactly what I pictured. But so, John, it's funny, when we heard you were going to be on the panel, Cam and I were talking, and we sort of made an assumption that you were going to be skeptical of bots in the bot universe, but
why?
But I don't know if that's true.
Why did you think that?
Well, no, I somehow the reason I thought it, to be honest, is because you could have done anything for your next project, and you chose to do sort of a video network, and in some ways something that looks pretty traditional format for content consumption. And one of the thing I wanted to start out talking about is how you think that people are going to consume content in the future, how Cheddar fits in with that, and then I was going to ask Cam to take that.
Well,
that
first of all,
it's
an honor to be here, and it's always an honor to be at BetaWorks stuff. And a lot of the reason why I'm here today is that I met John when I was working at Google, and I was just kind of buried in this bureaucracy. And BetaWorks was really early in New York to kind of stimulate all the idea scene, really. So I always love your stuff, and I love John's stuff because it reminds me of being back in the universities. It's really always a thoughtful, idea-centric type environment. So I'm happy to be here.
And so when you did start Cheddar,
yeah,
what made you pick that as a project, and especially what were your thoughts about how people are going to be consuming media into the future in terms of launching a new brand?
I think I was always interested in live television. I always liked live, and I felt like it created a window on the world and this kind of ambient content that people needed in addition to on-demand content. And I had always loved CNBC since I was like a high schooler. The conventional wisdom had been that the world would just be on-demand programming and there would be no place for live video. And I like contrarian bets. You can't do contrarian for the sake of being contrarian, but the only shot you have of building anything substantial against incumbents is if you take the other side of the bet. And that really was the BuzzFeed story. And everybody forgets these things in retrospect. At the time Jonah got BuzzFeed going, and even by the time I had joined in year 3, everyone thought Facebook was stupid and a failure, and they didn't think anything meaningful was going to happen on it. And I know that sounds crazy, but you can go back and watch all the punditry from 2009, 2010, and that was the conventional wisdom on it. So I felt there'd be a place for live programming, and I didn't think that the format itself was broken. I felt that the content and the distribution was broken, that people liked smart people talking about things and debating issues, and people liked video live from around the world showing things and happenings, and that increasingly technology, media, and entertainment, everything from rockets landing on their tails to self-driving cars to new phones and new devices and new apps, were becoming something that was widely culturally appealing to everybody in their 20s and 30s, and the mainstream media wasn't covering it. So I said, let's do that live. And at the time I started the company, Jeremy Liu from Lightspeed was the only person who liked the idea of live, because Facebook had not yet announced they were doing live, right? Then we got going, then Facebook announced live, and then, everybody thought I was a genius, right? But they always think you're an idiot before they think you're a genius,
I'm really glad to hear that, actually.
So,
my CEO of Poncho.
So that was the thesis, that no one was doing live, nobody was doing linear, and I felt that there would be a need for it on all these TV screens.
And what about messaging platforms? Because I know that my thesis from Poncho, and I think Cam can talk about how that fit into Bytes, is that mobile is really the only thing that matters for building a new business, and that the only thing increasingly that matters on mobile is messaging and being on messaging platforms. Mm-hmm. And so is that an important part of your strategy? Have you thought about distributing Cheddar content onto messaging?
Well, the notifications, and this symposium was called Notifications last year, right? And bots are sort of the evolution of notifications. And it's become increasingly important because of live, because there are moments in the live feed that are interesting to a person, and they wouldn't know it unless they had a nudge. The way that television does that is it's on in the background, and they try to put something visually distinctive on to catch out of the corner of your eye. And I think that messaging and notifications and bots are the way that we will know to tune into the live feed. And we do that right now. We do it ad hoc. It's not sort of our core, but we built a crummy little Slack bot that people can install that we tell them when we're going live. Facebook is a form of the bots or notifications telling people when the live feed is on, and we have the guests, when they come on, share out live on Facebook that they're there. So it's actually all done very manually and crudely right now, and there's a place for bots to fix that.
But actually, what I'm hearing is that they're part of the content discovery mechanism for the content that you're doing.
Well, it's like Wired circa 1992. Like push is the new pull, right? I do think you need an intelligent push mechanism to tell you when there's something on that you want to watch. And Twitter is working on this now too. That when the NFL, you ask the little Twitter bot to remind you when the NFL Thursday broadcast is on. They rolled that out this week. You get the blue push down. So I think that I think you need some intelligence, and that's what makes a bot different than a notification. A notification is dumb, and a bot is an intelligent notification.
Great. Cam, what were you thinking about when you decided to start Bytes?
Yeah,
in terms of especially the future of media and how people would consume it.
Yeah, sure. So I think a piece of it is sort of that nudge, that tune-in nudge, say something's happening right now. But what was super interesting to us was that we started noticing specifically within news feeds and other type of social environments, even sometimes on web pages, that people were constantly sort of gravitating towards these dynamic discussions and maybe more so away from the static content or static articles. And so when I would go into social, or if I'd go to a web page, I'd notice immediately, I'd look at a headline and an image, and I'd go straight to the comments. I wanted to know what the conversation was around it. And so for messaging as a channel, it sort of is the most endemic way to have a discussion or a live talk or a conversation around a piece of content. Like this morning, I got a notification about who the best sleeper players are to choose in my fantasy draft, like this coming weekend. And that's interesting on its face, but what's more interesting is to be able to consume that content in the context of a discussion with friends that I have. And so that was really the genesis, or at least the seed idea, was how do we, in a sort of organic and really like endemic way, enable discussions around thin layers of content that people seem to want to talk about.
And do you think it's important that when you build your product, how much guidance do you think users need in order to figure out how to use it and what it means to be commenting kind of in a messaging stream around a kind of floating piece of content as opposed to on a web page or just having a chat with your friends?
Yeah, well, I think there's some there's some good stuff and there's some bad stuff. The good news is I don't know how mainstream bots are yet. Right, so it's not like people have developed these really hardcore, solid conventions around what the behavior is supposed to be, right? But on the flip side, people don't exactly know how they interact with some other potential like form of intelligence in the midst of the conversation, right? So I think you do have to give some guardrails. For us, we specifically highlight ways in which you can join a conversation. We make it extremely obvious. And it's really important for us to also like highlight, some of the things that we don't do. So specifically, we might say that, this is not a bot to chit chat with the bot to say like, how's your day today? Or like, how's your love life going? Or that kind of thing. It's more of a discussion tool for responding or reacting to specific content. As we go forward, we think it'll be super interesting. We think we'll be able to do things like users can speak to the bot and say, hey, I heard that Kobe Bryant stopped by Cheddar, right? Like, take me to that, clip. And it can just fast forward or zip right to that moment, on Cheddar when Kobe stops by and, shakes John's hand, right? So we think there's use cases for that kind of thing, but it's super important for us to say, hey, like the use case here really is that you have an opportunity to join the discussion with other people who are really interested in this particular content.
John, are you planning on building a bot for Cheddar, or would you think about one?
Well, as I knew I was coming here, I thought a lot more about it over the past 2 weeks, and I I'm trying to build as little technology as possible this time around. I think that at the time that BuzzFeed was done, Jonah was a technologist and wanted to build everything internal because the stuff wasn't that good. Now I'm sort of blown away by how much good software is being built. I was talking to John about CrowdTangle, which is an amazing product for us. CrowdTangle allows us to see to benchmark ourselves against other people on Facebook, but also to see who's a good guest to book based on the engagement that their audience has. So I guess I'd like to find a good bot that does what we need to do and just knit it together. I think that we've done a remarkable job of knitting together technology. We have all of the real-time graphics. We've got 5 robotic cameras at 3 different studios, and we've got a team of hackers that are good at taking all this old television stuff and knitting it into the web. So to answer your question, I'd like to buy some software or use some software.
Okay, I think there are probably some people here who could want to help with that. I know that when...
And we're going to tag all the videos. So we had a conversation about this today. As we go on all of our various platforms, every guest, and we use a piece of software called ENPS now. And this has been such an exciting and fun thing for me to learn all this old stuff. Because there's a lot of white space to innovate because none of these incumbent companies have done it. So now we have this system called EMPS, which ties into all the cameras and all of the triggering of the rundown. So everything is coded. If you're on, it has your name, it has your company, it has your topics. There's nothing that would stop us from hooking into that, a person expressing their interest, and as the live stuff is firing, to have it push, have that bot contact different people.
So actually sort of almost outbound search, right? Because I think we've talked, I think the bots, at least from my view at Poncho, they do 2 things. One is they're kind of a user interface into into content, and the other is that they're kind of a search interface into content. And I think they're both part of what you're trying to do, and they're not. Even though Poncho is a very heavily personified bot and is very chatty, and we try to give him a real personality, we're not into bots just for their own sake. But I think the real the utility and the power is that the way that they can be a bridge to actually delivering content in a native way in kind of a messaging centric environment.
And I think it has to be real time. I think the shelf life of our content is basically 0, right? And because nobody says like, oh, I want to go back and watch CNN from 10 a.m. this morning. Nobody knows the name of any of the shows on CNN or Fox News or MSNBC. They say like, I'm going to put on CNBC to like see what's going on in the world. And there's an expectation that you will get a general update of what is on topic. So we really need that. We had an interview this morning with Blake Irving, the CEO of GoDaddy, a large multi-billion-dollar public company. If you're interested in that, there's an intimacy and an excitement to watching the news live. But if you didn't see it live, you sort of don't want to go back and watch it because there's something new that you need to watch then. And we continually have people say to us, oh, I wish I had known that is on. And then we say to them, oh, well, you can go back in the archive and view it. But nobody does. So I'd rather tell 100% of the people that are interested and have 5% of them be able to watch it then, and then not have them be annoyed.
Cam, as you've built your company, one of the topics of discussion around bots has been, is the technology there to really build a compelling and engaging interface with people right now, or is it something that is coming in the future but isn't a thing yet? And I wonder if you could describe sort of what you think is nailing it, and maybe what parts of the process you feel like aren't quite there yet, and that you're sort of hacking.
You mean just around bots generally?
Yeah, just from like building the bot and trying to build kind of user engagement from that.
Yeah, sure. I think the big elephant in the room, or the most obvious thing, is that NLP is an AI around NLP is really challenging, right? A lot of people have alluded to this already, right? Like, I may be able to have a conversation with Siri about setting an alarm or something like that, but it's really difficult to say like, tell me the best store where the new Yeezys are going to come out, right? Like that kind of stuff, or more complex questions or things that are not confined to a specific domain are more challenging. So the thing for us is that we try to focus on how can we create an experience where users can have a discussion that works, more so than how do we create a personality that can have a back and forth, like it's artificial intelligence sort of personality that can have this robust conversation with whoever's in the room. And so our focus has said, all right, let's figure out how to just leverage the channel, because we know people are already sharing content in groups on messaging, right? It'd be hard pressed to believe that there are people in this room who aren't in at least one group conversation. Like, people already in group conversations are already sharing content. How do we sort of make that experience more interactive, more interesting, and even reward people for participating in these kinds of conversations? So we try as best we can to stay away from technologies that we know haven't improved in a way that is like maybe 10x better than what's there today. We think there's some people who probably just do it better than us, you know, but I think that's why we stay in our lane and focus
So
on
the
that.
conversation is provided by the other users, not necessarily by the bot. Basically,
Right.
So I'll answer, if I may, I'm going to answer that question with my poncho hat on. I mean, what we do, or we've tried to do, is to basically verticalize the content so that we've been able to, I think Poncho has gotten pretty good in the bot space at answering your questions about weather, and not 100%, but good enough that we have, I think, the best engagement of any bot on Facebook by far. And we've been able to do that because basically we sort of are like, I'm good at talking about weather, I'm not so good at talking about other stuff. As we add other verticals, we're sort of beta testing horoscopes right now, and they've been phenomenally popular. And that's another one where we're going to serve up some written content, and then the bot will be able to have a conversation around that content and that subject matter. So next month, Punch will be able to talk about weather and astrology, and the following month it might be something else. But we always, and occasionally we'll throw in, like if you ask Poncho about Donald Trump, he'll answer. But those things are kind of just throw-ins to sort of add to the credibility of, of the experience that this is kind of like a character. Mm-hmm. And I think what we found is that users don't have a problem understanding the concept of a bot. They just assume it can do everything because that's what they've been seeing in science fiction and in literature for years. And they're like, okay, it's here. I can ask you anything and I expect a perfect reply every time. So it's not I think explaining bots and why they're fun and why they're cool isn't a problem. Sort of getting the user to play along with the limitations and still have a positive experience that's what we've found to be the challenge. And I think at this stage of the AI evolution, we're sort of solving that by being pretty strict about what vertical content we're able to talk about, and sort of training the user if it's outside that scope not to expect an answer from us. Right. And I think that's really been working for us, and that's kind of our recipe for now. And a year from now, it could be very different. But the thing that I think is interesting is that there does seem to be a user demand for sort of an intermediary, a sort of personified intermediary in terms of bringing information to them. And one of the things I think is interesting about that is it's another way in, perhaps, I think when you guys touched on this about the search aspect of it, and it's another, one of the problems we have right now is that there's just too much content happening all the time. And is there a way to make that both easier for the users and also more relaxing? Like, one of the things I feel about Cheddar, for example, is I feel like I'm always missing something. And I don't exactly want to go back and watch that interview that I didn't see this morning, but I feel like I missed something by not seeing it. So almost that whole model makes me feel stressed a little bit. And not that I want a summary of everything, but I think one of the things that bots can really help with in the future is sort of helping you find stuff. And I think that's pretty interesting. I wonder if you guys could just give your thoughts about that media overload and that sort of that stress and feeling you're missing out.
Yeah, and I think that incompleteness is a feature, like not a bug. And I think missing things is a feature and not a bug. And I think that most people in media now are trying to hit home runs. And we've built this so that we're never going to hit, we could hit a home run, but the business is optimized around singles and doubles. Like, I want whenever you turn it on, there to be high quality informative programming, and if there's something that's big enough that you feel like it should be covered. So on the day of an IPO, if we have Jeff Lawson on, we will rerun that. But in a sense, I think the network, I think Cheddar should be self-aware of kind of telling you, of kind of curating and putting on what is most important, because nobody else is really doing that. Everybody else wants to make a minute-long video that gets 20 or 30 million views. And I think that for the world that we live in now, there need to be these kind of feeds and these kind of ambient sources of content now as well. I also think we solve that problem when we go to a full 8-hour linear day, which we will be at by the end of the year. and then from 8 to 12, and then 12 to 16, where the behavior becomes either I want to see what's going on, I'm going to go look at Cheddar, or I have some agent or some form of being informed that now is a good time to watch, and if sometimes I miss it, it just makes me want to go back and see it another time. And I think there's all sorts of experiences in life where FOMO creates brand love as opposed to brand anxiety.
Cam, have you thought about that in terms of just that overload of content and how you manage that experience?
Yeah, we've thought about that a little bit, and we have some internal discussions about it. I think that most of the time I don't miss things because, like, I was hoping to see something, or I got tipped off, nudged a week ago, and I missed it. I missed something in the context of it's a group talking point, right? And my friends are like, hey, did you see this? Or, hey, do you know about this yet, right? And so, the way we think about it is that many times, like, friends can be your best nudge. Like, they can be the ones that ultimately, like, help you find or, like, help you filter through the stuff that potentially you might be interested in. Now, if you're subscribed to some friends group, using our platform or something like that, we think that can be an easier way to make sure that people stay up to date. But, I mean, it's true, right? We've never had more content than we have today, right? I mean, if I want to go to Netflix, I can go to Netflix and see 100 different documentaries on just one vertical in food, right? So everything, like, a lot of content seems to be competing with, videos competing with text. Text is competing with messaging from friends. So there's a lot there. Our expectation is that users will help their friends and people within their network to find the content that they want to consume. And I think that's what we're really focused on with Bytes.
Well, and also there's also the whole notion of, like, summaries as well too. Like sports, I have no interest in sports. I don't actually like any sports, but most people do like sports, right? And it's probably
Not most people at BetaWorks. Cam's the only one.
okay. But sports is the most successful media of all time, right? There's probably no movie, no TV show. There's nothing that's more successful than sports. And you probably could argue that there's nothing more successful ever than football, But nobody says, like, a very small percentage of people say, I want to go back and watch that game, right? You either see the game, you miss the game, and then you see highlights, or you go and look at the scores. And I think that the way to deal with most information overload is to just consume it in the moment, and most of it is very impermanent, and that you don't need to go back and watch more of it. And I think you'll see more people trying to create media, because I just think that's how humans are more attuned. I think this whole, like, you got to see this, you got to catch up. I mean, I think Instagram, far be it for me to criticize those guys, but, like, you want to see what people are doing now. Like, you're on the bus on a Saturday, you want to see what other people are doing on Saturday. When you see the photo that they've now algorithmically put up from Friday, and it's Saturday and you're on the bus, like, it's like, why would I want to see an old photo? If I want to see an old photo, I use, Time Hop or something like that, right?
I remember even years ago, someone said to me, nothing more interesting than today's newspaper, nothing less interesting than yesterday's newspaper.
Absolutely, and look at the value created in that. I mean, and actually it makes the media better. Every day we do wrap fish in the show. Like, there's no, like, let's go back and fix it. Let's just make tomorrow better. And I think that does something for the audience as well too. Again, to the sports analogy, there's no, like, let's go back and play the game better for the fan. It's like, let's play the game tomorrow better for the fans because today's over.
There's something to your point about, like, looking at summaries or, like, snippets of content, because it seems as if over time, like, our appetite for content has increased. It's not as if we have all this content and now, like, we want less, right? I can read, 50 headlines or 100 headlines in a day because of different news feeds. Whereas before, maybe if I dialed up HuffingtonPost.com or something like that, maybe I read 5, maybe I read 6. So it seems as if the velocity with which we want to consume, or that we need to consume media, it has, like, increased over time. And I think, like, that's something that is really important for us, or something that we think about a lot. Maybe we don't want to watch the game from yesterday, right? But maybe I do want to know, like, how it played out.
And it makes you a more efficient media consumer, and it actually means I actually think people are now less inundated by media, and I'll tell you why. When I was growing up, people watched 5 to 6 hours of television a day, right? Most people in this room now are not watching television. I mean, that's the statistics. 18 to 34-year-old television viewership is down 30 to 40% over the past 5 years. And all of that time is being taken up with either watching the game live or looking at the clips or reading an article or going to the gym, right? There was 5 or 6 hours. There was so much time that people were just watching terrible programming with because there was nothing else to do. So I think people are actually way better off today. They're not watching stupid sitcoms, by and large. That stuff's not
Unless
doable.
they want to.
But I mean, look at the viewership of that stuff. I mean, the reason why the big networks have declining ratings in single-digit percentages now every single month is because they're programming for 50 and 60-year-olds because they're the only people that want to watch that stuff, and as a result, they program more for 50 and 60-year-olds because they're not getting any younger audience, and it becomes the most vicious cycle. And you know that our generation, there may be some hybrid consumption. There may be some people that want to go back and watch 2.5 Men that are in their 20s or 30s. But you know for sure, for those of us that have 6 and 7-year-olds, they're just never going to watch that stupid stuff. They're so much more attuned to higher quality content. Their expectations is for no commercial loads.
Yeah, look, I hope the content's more higher quality, but we're actually out of time.
Wait,
so
wait one second. I think it'd be hard to argue that when you look at the quality of programming today on Netflix and Amazon, and you look at Transparent and House of Cards, when I mean, I'm older than you, but when I was growing up, there was a few shows on the air like L.A. Law that were high quality. And actually, if you put L.A. Law up against Transparent, it's garbage, right? So I think that there has definitely been an up-leveling in the quality of the content by almost any measure.
If you don't count the long tail of all the stuff that...
Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah, you're
and
right.
if you don't count
Yes.
reality TV in a lot of those programs. So I think the drama content is better, but it's a complicated equation.
I think that's right.
We have, I don't know if we have time for a couple of questions. I think it would be great if we did. Anyone have any?
Maybe one question.
All right. You're on a tight ship here. Anyone have a question?
Nobody ever asked the first question.
Yeah,
You
it's
get the
always hard.
First question, you get 5.
Or why don't you ask the first question, Patrick?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, good. Someone back there.
One question. John, earlier you talked about not wanting to build as little technology as possible. How do you think about not owning the channels that you're distributing, whether it's Facebook or otherwise?
Look, I lived with a lot of Facebook dependency at BuzzFeed, right? Now they are all at each other's throats, which is great. They all want to be good in video. They all realize video. So there's enough imbalance and war amongst the platforms that I think this is the most stable time and the most optionality you have as a media company. You know, we are on now Facebook, Amazon, Twitter, Vimeo, and those are just the ones that we've announced. Whereas, so we don't have that. So I'm very, very comfortable with it. And in some ways, some mornings I wake up and I wish that Facebook would just go away because I think we've got a better opportunity to adapt than a lot of other people. So it's imbalanced, which is good for a provider.
I think that's happening or going to happen on the chat platforms as well, with the platforms that Google is about to announce, what Twitter is about to announce, some of the stuff that Apple's already done. I think that's good news for people like Poncho and Bytes who can be on multiple platforms and build a brand that kind of stretches across multiple platforms. That this period right now is actually good for content type companies.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.